Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for being here today at the shrine to celebrate Holy Mass here with us. What a beautiful day. So I realize that it's a privilege to be up here and be able to speak with you all. And so when I was asked to give a talk, I really try to take it to heart and pray about kind of get a sense of what the Lord wants me to talk about when I'm up here. And when I was praying about it, Sister Carla had given me many good resources to read through that might give me some ideas. But I'll be completely honest, when I was praying, I didn't hear much of anything at all. It was very silent. And it kind of made me uncomfortable. I said, Lord, I have to give this talk in a few days. And what would give me a sense of what you want me to talk about? And nothing. I didn't hear anything. I didn't get a sense of anything. And it wasn't until I was up here every day here at the shrine. We have Eucharistic adoration from 12 to 1, and I was praying the prayers, the 10 evangelical virtues of Mary, and all of a sudden I just had the sense of my soul that the Lord wanted me to speak on silence. And I didn't realize it until then that the Lord had been giving me the answer to my prayer the whole time when He was just being silent with me in my prayer time. So today I'm going to be speaking on the power of silence in our lives. So many of our lives have so much noise and so little silence. And I think that because of this, we're kind of missing something as a culture. I really like this quote by St. Benedict XVI. He said, "God's first language is silence." When was the last time you chose to enter into silence and didn't distract yourself by introducing some kind of noise? You don't have to answer that, but just think about it. When was the last time you sat in silence and you just were, and you didn't introduce music, you didn't introduce, even if it's mental noise, physical noise, actual noise, or, any kind of noise at all? When was the last time? God's first language is silence because God speaks in silence. He reveals Himself to us in silence. And I think this is amazing because I grew up and I heard about St. Faustina for the first time when I was 13 or 14. And it was amazing to me because to St. Faustina, when she prayed, God would actually appear to her. Jesus would, and He would speak to her audibly, and they'd have conversation. I thought, wow, that's amazing, that's incredible. So this must be what it means to pray, right? This must mean when you enter into prayer, God actually speaks to you. I must be doing something wrong then because I don't hear much of anything. But as I continued to grow in my relationship with the Lord, I realized, now wait. Sometimes this does happen. In St. Faustina's case, Jesus showed up to her and spoke what was on His heart to her. And if you're here today, you know that this does happen to people. If you know the history of the shrine and maybe have read A Call to Trust, you know that this is possible. But for an overwhelming majority, God's first language to us is through silence. And think about this for a second, because that can probably be the reason that we don't really like the silence, right? I remember when I first entered religious life, we spent a good amount of time in silent prayer each day, and I will be honest, at times it was literally painful for me to sit there in silence with the Lord and just be. And I found myself really, really wanting to go back to, how I used to pray prior to entering community. I would go and I would sing the chaplet. I would sing, the rosary, the Holy Rosary, or pray out loud with people. And this is beautiful. This is a type of prayer that is much needed, and there's a time and a place. But God speaks to us in the silence. There is such a need to just sit in silence with the Lord. But I found myself, when intense feelings would arise in the silence, that's when I would want to sing. Or that's what I would want to pray out loud, because it would distract me from these feelings that were rising up. And part of me almost felt like, praying in silence is causing these emotions, and they're uncomfortable, and I don't like them. So I'm just going to sing the chaplet. I'm just going to pray out loud. Again, beautiful, but silence is needed. And don't get me wrong, I found that it's not the prayer that's causing these uncomfortable emotions. It's just that, and I believe that Father Mike kind of says it the best. He says that silence is a great magnifier, okay? Silence reveals to us what is already in our heart. And that hit me, when I first entered, even till today. I shouldn't even be saying when I first entered. It still happens to this day. When I sit in silent prayer, it can be uncomfortable and it can be painful because, strong emotions, intense feelings can arise that I don't really know what to do with. Silence reveals us to ourselves. God reveals us to ourselves through the silence. And I can't speak for you, I can only speak from my own experience, that I quickly realized when I entered community that I have a lot of anger and hurt in my heart. And when I go to pray, I'm so used to being distracted by this, that when I had to force myself to sit in silence, I realized that, wow, my heart is really hurting, it's really broken. And I think that is a huge reason why we don't like the silence. Me personally, I didn't want to have to deal with the stuff that was going on in my heart because it wasn't easy. It's very hard and it can be painful. But I want to just propose this to you today. What is the worst thing that could happen if you sat in silence with the Lord, especially in prayer, and you let those feelings, those thoughts, these emotions, fear, anxiety, whatever it might be, what if you let those arise in your heart, and then you let God into those, and you invited God into them? Say, Lord, I have all of this fear and anxiety. I'm so afraid. These are here and they're rising up. I'm inviting you into it, and I'm asking you to reveal yourself in it. Reveal yourself to me. Lord, I have all these crazy thoughts of anger, and I don't know what to deal with them. Okay, so they're coming to the surface. God, I'm inviting you into them. Reveal what is going on beneath this, because it isn't this, there's some brokenness, there's some other type of wound inside, deep inside, that only God can bring you the healing. Friends, so many of us spend far too much time distracting ourselves, even in prayer, that we resort to telling God the things he thinks he wants to hear from us. The things that he doesn't necessarily, of course he wants to hear about your day and what's going on, but he wants to hear the things that are going on in your heart that you need to invite him into. That is what he wants you to bring to him in prayer. And I can speak to you about this because you're looking at one of the biggest culprits of it. Okay? The sisters can testify to you. I have a hard time staying silent, and I have a difficult time staying still, I admit, because when I do, the Lord reveals myself to me, and it's uncomfortable. Okay? So I encourage you, each of you, to make a conscious effort in a society that's bombarding you with noise at every turn, to give silence a try. I'm not going to say it's easy, but it's necessary, okay? Turn off the TV, turn off the news, turn off your music, silence your phone for a little bit, and let what is really going on in the depths of your heart arise. You'll be revealed, exposed, and magnified in the silence. And then give it all to God. Say, God, come into this, help me make sense of what's going on inside, and bring me the type of healing in these areas that only you can bring me. And you will. I would just like to close today with a quote from Scripture that I thought kind of fit the bill. It's a reading from the first book of Kings, The Lord said to Elijah, "Go out and stand on the mountain before the Lord. The Lord will pass by." There was a strong and violent wind, rending the mountains and crushing rocks before the Lord, but the Lord was not in the wind. After the wind, an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. After the earthquake, fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. After the fire, a light, silent sound. A light, silent sound. And when he heard this, Elijah hid his face in his cloak and went out and stood at the entrance of the cave. The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Remember, friends, God's first language is silence, and he will speak to you in the silence of your hearts if you allow your interior life to be quiet enough to hear him. May God bless you. Thank you.
Thank you. Sister Piper, I have a question.
Sure. Mother has a question.
Is it always uncomfortable when God reveals himself? Is it always uneasy?
It's not always uneasy. For the most part, For the most part, when he's revealing things that you need to work on, that's when it can be uncomfortable. But when God's revealing himself in the silence, good point. I shouldn't say that it's always uncomfortable, because it's not. Sometimes it can be very beautiful. But in this vocation, in the silence, and in all of your vocations, everyone sitting here, you know, our days are filled with noise, but the silence is necessary, and God wants to reveal himself to you in that silence. And when he reveals himself to you, it can be very beautiful. You know, it's uncomfortable at first, but you realize what he's doing. You realize that this is a necessary part of, you know, exceeding in not only prayer, but just becoming a better version of yourself. And in the end, it's so worth it, even if it can be uncomfortable at first.
So how about an example of your vocation, your call, when that moment happened, that was revealed to you? It is uncomfortable, it was beautiful, right?
Yes, yeah. So Mother, if you can't hear her, she said, at that moment when my vocation was revealed to me personally, what was that like? If any of you have heard my testimony, I felt the call to religious life when I was in Poland in 2017, visiting the Divine Mercy Shrine in Krakow. And I was kneeling before the image of Divine Mercy when I felt God telling me, inviting me, I should say, to follow him by following in the footsteps of St. Faustina. And I cried. My first reaction was to cry. Because at the time, I heard it and I took it in, but I wasn't quite ready. I loved my hair and makeup. I curled my hair all the time, wore false eyelashes, and we didn't want to give that up. And when I heard that, I said, Lord, you're calling the wrong girl. It's not me. I don't know if I can do that. But and it took me 6 years. So it was uncomfortable at first. It was uncomfortable for a good amount of time. Even up until actually the day I entered, March 25th, 2021. But it's amazing to see in those moments when you give yourself to the Lord and you accept his will in the silence, no matter how hard it is, how far he can take you and how he will help you grow. And these things that, might be coming up in your heart when you pray. You might not see the changes right away, but I look back over the last 2.5 years and I don't recognize myself. Especially not the super curly haired, makeup wearing teenager that I was when I was first called.